I'd like to acknowledge that today we're recording on the traditional lands of the Garner people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded. You're listening to Unqualified and Unafraid, the podcast where I interview young emerging creatives in Adelaide about just going for it and pushing through self-doubt. Ellie Cheesman is an independent filmmaker residing in Port Lincoln. Her latest film, Womenarche, was supported by the IAF, the South Australian Government and Country Arts SA. The film explores the idea of a young person's first period. In her words, Womenarche is an attempt to soften the menarche experience, to destigmatise it, and to encourage those who go through adolescent physical changes to respect each other and treat themselves with gentleness and love. It won and was selected for festivals in Berlin, Paris, and Italy. A dance teacher as well, Ellie is an all-round creative being. She has had a unique and exciting life living in regional Australia, studying cinema abroad in France. I can't wait to chat to her about her experience making a film that garnered the support of multiple organisations and why she chooses to create regionally in Port Lincoln. Thank you so much for joining me, Ellie.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
The first question is what I ask all my guests, which is, when was a time where you felt unqualified, but you chose to be unafraid?
This is a really rich question because I have a kind of controversial take on being qualified for something. Because someone can have like a master's degree in like clinical psychology, for example, so they're qualified to be a psychologist. But if they have really like bad people skills, basically, they're going to be a really bad therapist. So I'm not really sure what my definition of qualified is. I think if you can get the job done well, and you're proud of it, and your client's happy with it, or whoever is involved is happy with it, then you're qualified, if that makes sense. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think if you're happy with what you're doing, like, or if it's adding value to the world, then you're qualified to do it. But I guess what I'm asking is, when was a time where you felt scared or like you kind of suffered from imposter syndrome, but you just like pushed through it?
The example that comes to mind is I had my first art therapy client through the Department of Child Protection, and I was a recent graduate. And I was like, how on earth am I going to help this person? But from an arts perspective as well, was I guess the first film that I got paid to make, because usually I'd made art for myself and it didn't really involve, there were no consequences. Like if I made a bad film, there were no really bad consequences. But when you're getting paid to make something by particularly a government body, there are consequences if if you don't do a good job. And so I was like, wow, I really need to up my game for this one.
I mean, you've done a lot of projects. You're an art therapist as well. I know that you're also a dance teacher.
Yes, I am. I love.
Why don't you kind of give us a bit of an introduction to who you are as a creative and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. I tend to say I'm a mixed media artist because I kind of dance around in different fields. I work mainly in moving image, so that could be film, but photography as well, and dance and visual arts as well a little bit. But mostly it's dance, film, and photography that I work with in my personal practice. And then I work as an art therapist and a dance teacher when working with others.
That's awesome. Yeah. So last year you released a film, Womenarch. Am I saying it correctly?
I call it Womenarche.
Oh,
but
okay.
That's only because the title of the film comes from the word menarche, like the first period bleed. And I thought it was funny that the word menarche started with the word men when it's such a like feminine word. So I was like, oh, Womenarche. So,
I've been
but
reading it like menarche.
I mean, everything's arbitrary, right? I think that's totally fine. Yeah.
All right, Womenarche.
Mhm.
So it won at the Paris International Film Awards Best Documentary.
Oh, that's
Um,
nice.
and I think it was accepted like into festivals in Berlin and Italy as well. Um, Tell us all about this film. What is it? What is it about?
Well, it's about destigmatizing the menstrual bleed, but particularly for the first period bleed, like the menarche, for children or young people, because I feel like there's so much stigma around it because it's like a new and foreign thing, and you've operated your life and your body in the same way for so long, and then suddenly blood's coming out of your vagina and you're like, what is going on? This is so scary. Or for a lot of people. And there's also a lot of associations with the period that socially we have. And I just wanted kids to feel comfortable in their skin. So I made this film just to kind of normalize it and show them that that it's beautiful and our bodies are beautiful and it's okay, basically.
So what kind of approach did you take? Because it's a documentary.
Yeah.
And there's obviously like a lot of ways you could have gone about this, but like why did you decide to kind of take it in the way that you did in
I tried
terms
to
of
make
like interviewing people and stuff like that?
yeah, I interviewed I think four main groups. I started with some really some 10-year-olds, so like young people who were premenstrual, and then I interviewed a couple of or a young adult, so she was 18 or 19 maybe, and then a couple of adults. So we had like someone who'd recently got their first period, a group who hadn't had their periods yet, and then a couple of older people who were reflecting back on their experiences, just to give a holistic perspective. And I tried to make the visuals as soft as possible, so it wasn't as confronting for young audiences. So I was just showing like footage of nature and flowers and little kids dancing and stuff like that, to make it appealing for the kids.
Lovely. So you received support from quite a few funding bodies, Regional Arts Fund, Country Arts SA, Regional Arts Australia. How the hell did you get all of these people on board? Like, it's really impressive for such a young filmmaker. And I think there's a lot of people like in our age bracket out there who want to make their films, but they don't even see it as a possibility that they would get like government support. Like, what was the journey with actually nailing this down?
Well, that is such a wonderful question because funding through the government is so hit and miss. Like even just this afternoon, I applied for a grant like months ago, and I just heard back that it was denied funding. And you can think it's such a legitimate project that's so worthy of funding. Like the one that I just got rejected for some funding for was like a community arts program for people at risk, like at-risk youth and underprivileged kids in the community and that kind of thing. Anyway, so it's pretty hit and miss, but how did I convince them? I think I just really rammed the political aspect of the film, and I said, it's basically your responsibility as our government to be looking after our community, and this project is going to help our community because half the population has this experience, like the period bleed.
Mm.
And it's kind of your job to look after us, basically, so you should give me money for this.
All right, you put the onus on them.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
I like that. Now, you had a screening for this film.
Yeah.
And was this kind of something that you were able to do from the support that you received, or was it kind of like DIY, you're going to set up a screening, and what did that look like?
There are a few different ones. One was DIY. I just wanted to set up a screening. I did get some funding for that through Country Arts SA. And the other one, I think the local school asked if they could have a screening. So because I live in a small remote community, word spreads really fast, which is a good thing and a bad thing, depending on what is being spread. But the school reached out and said, can we show our students? And I said, yeah, sure. So I brought the film in and I screened it and had like a Q&A with some students and their parents as well. Yeah, but the DIY one was just me going to my yoga studio with like a projector and like a speaker and just hoping for the best. I advertised a little bit, and so whoever showed up was welcome.
I love that. During the project, what would you say are the biggest things that you learned? I know that that's a hard question, but try your best.
Yeah. Biggest thing that I learned, I feel like it's, if this isn't too out there, it was like an internal knot was being untied in this film. This is more of like a personal than a holistic artistic thing, but it's like there was so much stigma around like women's bodies and people who menstruate, like their bodies and around the bleed and that kind of thing. And this project, through talking about it, either through talking about the film, the filmmaking process, or just the bleed itself through the interviews, kind of like undid that knot a little bit to make us all, everyone involved with the project, a bit more comfortable. I think that was a huge learning process and personal growth.
Yeah, I think that's really cool that the film can, before it's even finished and before people can even watch it, it's already having a positive impact on the people who are making it.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's why we make art, I think, or that's why I make art.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So what would you say has been like the coolest moment for you in your creative career so far?
I think last year's dance concert was really moving for me. I choreographed a piece to Mitski's Heat Lightning.
Nice.
And that was, yeah, it was so dope. I think because I'd spent 3 years training this group, and this was my last performance with them. So they'd like all the work that we'd put into them over the years. You could see it in their bodies, the way they moved, and with the music and in their costumes and everything. And then I filmed that and turned it into I just recorded the performance and made a little film out of that. I think that was one of the highlights. Yeah, because it's a collaboration of like dance and film, two things that I love, and putting them together to like highlight each other. That was a highlight.
What kind of age group do you usually work with in dance?
Oh, the dance school gave me the 11 to 14-year-old age group, but then I also, about once a year for a couple of months, work with the like 15 to 18-year-olds.
Do you
on a regular?
Sorry, it's hard on Zoom. Do you feel like because you're working so closely with people around the menarche age, that's kind of what also inspired you to like explore that in your filmmaking as well?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think because I developed like a close relationship with the students I was working with, and it kind of made me reflect back on my experiences at that age, because they come in with all sorts of things. Like I remember I just played a piece of music once, and one of the 11-year-olds started crying just because, you know, at that age there's so much going on, and just anything can just set them off. And I was like, yeah, man, I remember that was really difficult at that age, and all the transitions and the friendship groups and your body's changing, and you're like, oh, someone help me. So yeah, I wanted to look out for them, and I didn't want them to have the same experience I had. I wanted them to have a good one. So I was like, yeah, let's look after the kids.
Totally. It's really strange. I feel like whenever I see like a 13, 14-year-old girl or something, I always have this thought that's like, she's so me. And I feel like it's because we always have like this 13-year-old girl like inside us. And maybe this is kind of like the shared trauma of like girlhood, you know?
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I look at every woman and I'm like, you are me, I am you. And
Mm.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a crazy feeling, like, because I don't really see a lot of like, I don't really hang out with people who like aren't my age, or like I don't have like siblings that are
Oh,
that young or something. So when I see them on the train and I see like these 13-year-olds daydreaming out the train, I'm like, yeah, you get it.
same. It's a mirror. I'm looking at a mirror. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's weird. Before I taught dance or before I moved to Lincoln, I hadn't interacted with anyone younger than me in like ever, pretty much. So it was a total shock to come here and I'm like immersed in that age group and younger. I'm like, whoa, this is crazy.
Wow. So being in Port Lincoln, I'm so curious to know what the creative scene is like there. If is there a creative scene?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's amazing. In a sense, there are like a couple of people who do their own visual art and that kind of thing. And obviously like there's a dance school, but yeah, there isn't really an art scene where people look at the world through the lens of art. I feel like people in the art scene, like you and your friends, see art everywhere and like look at the world through a lens. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, yeah, like a kind of romanticism.
That's it. Yeah, you've hit the nail on it. And if I live the world through that lens here in Lincoln, everyone's like, you're insane. Basically, you are so weird. And I'm like, well, that's just my thing. Yeah, not really an art scene here.
That's interesting. It's like, I feel like that's the country pragmatism, or like, I feel like, I feel like one of the reasons that like country towns don't value art as much is because they're still in this like survival mindset.
Yeah.
Like, so when like they're confronted with like romantics, it's kind of like, why do you need that? That's not helpful
Yeah.
to survive.
Yeah. That's
Something
so well said. Yeah, something like that. Exactly. Something exactly like that, maybe.
cool. So you've lived, speaking of romanticism, you've literally lived in Paris.
Yes, I have. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And what was it like studying at the film school there?
It was so fly. Like, it was amazing. Because I just finished at a really conservative school and then I went and I was like, I'm out of here. Went to Paris and was like immersed in like the most indie of indie. Like these kids were insane. Like teenagers smoking out the front. Like we had smoke breaks in class, like during our
Wow.
classes at uni to go and like smoke cigarettes. Not that I did that if there's anyone listening. But it was so refreshing just to see that the world was so much bigger than people let themselves think it is, Like in a country town like Lincoln, where I live, I think it's beautiful. I love it here, but people do think like this is all there is.
Yeah.
This is how you live a life. Whereas going there kind of broke that cycle, and I was like, actually, I can do whatever I want. Like, I don't need to buy a house. I could just, make art and vibe pretty much.
Totally. So like after experiencing all that in Paris, why have you decided to come back to Lincoln, and why do you continue to create in Lincoln?
I really, I'm an ENFJ, as you know, so
Mhm.
we're big on people, we love community. And I was actually born in Port Lincoln, but I only moved back 3 years ago because like the COVID pandemic. And then after living here, we were only meant to be here 6 weeks, and now it's been 3 years, I think, just because it's kind of magnetic here. Like people care about each other here. So to an extent I can do my own thing, even though it's not really, how do I say this? It's like, it's not like there's a community where I can be like other people, you know, like making art and that kind of thing. But there's a community that accepts it to an extent. Like a lot of my friends are surfers, and so they're very open to everything, and they just like peace and love and accept, even though you're not like them.
Yeah, nice.
I don't know if that's answered the question.
No, I get what you mean. It's almost like, because you could move to the city and you could find people who have the same interests as you, but it's gonna take like a long time to actually build up like a real community feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And community is so special. And when you find it, I kind of just, maybe from my past experiences, I'm like, I need to hold on to this. This is so special. I'm gonna keep that.
Yeah. And I think if you can get to a place like where people do accept you, you can like, even though you're not like everyone else, it can make you feel like you're bringing something to the table. Whereas when you're in the city and everyone is trying to do the same things you are, it's kind of like, oh, well, what is even the point?
Word. Yeah. Yeah, that's really true. I think I also just really love nature as well. I considered, moving lots of places, but for some reason also I like being near the ocean and surfing and things. So
So have you been up to any other kind of creative projects since Womenarche? I can't say it.
however you want to. Yeah, Womenarche. Yeah, so many. So many. I'm currently working on the second one, which I was just in Japan a couple of months ago filming that. And
Wow.
it's wild. And I was just editing it before I came here. And it was such an interesting experience because I don't speak Japanese and all of the interviews are in Japanese. So I had to get a friend to help me translate, and I'm just hoping that it's like accurately translated, and editing something in another language is a whole new challenge. Pretty much
That sounds like a very interesting project. Like, can you reveal what it is?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So it's basically like the first film in that I'm trying to destigmatize and explore people's perceptions and lived experiences of the menarche, and of the period in general. I sound like such a radical feminist.
In a good way.
In a good way, why not? Because I went to a school, and I interviewed a group of like post-menarche girls, and then a group of pre-menarche girls, and then I interviewed one 12-year-old who was premenstrual. Like I interviewed her just by herself. So I was just exploring how Japanese kids experience that same thing that we experience here.
Yeah, that's really cool. So I'm assuming this exploration could like expand to like all different cultures.
That's my dream. Look, if I can get funding, yeah, that's my dream. I'd really like to do India as well, because that's so different. I tried to pick somewhere as different from Australia as possible, and I was like, Japan. Yeah.
And is that why you went to Japan?
Oh, there are a few reasons. I have an old friend who I hadn't seen since COVID because we lived in different countries. And we always made a joke. We skipped school to go to Rome or to go to Italy, and we stole some money from the Trevi Fountain, and we were like, we're going to use this money to buy a ticket to Japan. I don't know why. We're just really, that was our idea. And then I think I got a text from her saying I'm going to Japan, and so I was like, okay, now's the time.
Yes, that's awesome. So I want to hear more about your art therapy journey and how you got qualifications for that, and how you've been practicing that recently.
That journey was like radical. I took only a 1-year diploma in arts therapy, because I'm also doing a Bachelor of Psychology And I learned so much about the human experience from that 1 year. It's hard to even understand myself, but the main thing that I learned was about the equality and the equity of all people and our experiences, because I always thought that therapists were kind of there's a power imbalance, right? That people go to a therapist seeking their counsel in order to improve themselves. But the course was like, hold up, Ellie, that's not true at all. It's a therapist's job, actually. You're like on this even playing field, and it's a therapist's job to help the client to answer their own questions. So a therapist isn't meant to give answers to the client, but to help the client find their own answers, you know? And that was like mind-blowing for me. So I've just changed my whole outlook on the world. I'm like, no one knows anything. We have all the answers within ourselves, basically.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that is kind of like, I feel like if you don't realize that, you could have the risk of like having like a savior complex.
What? Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Yeah.
Or an inferiority complex even. I mean, so many kind of complexes, but now I'm just like, we're all created equal. No experience is more or less valuable than any other one, you know?
So interesting. I love that you're mixing like being a creative with psychology as well, because when I was like job hunting and I wasn't having a lot of luck and I started getting really disillusioned for like being in the arts, and I was like, I should study psychology. But it just got me thinking so much about how kind of what you're saying, like with the answers and stuff, is when I started thinking about like being a psychologist, I was like, but how sad is it that like people don't just know this? Like you have to go to school for like all these years to actually realize like how your own brain works. Like it should be like public shared knowledge.
Or a cultural knowledge as well. I feel like the Scandinavians have it innately in their culture. Like I'll have a conversation with one of my friends from like Denmark or something, and they'll be like, yeah, Ellie, of course this is common knowledge. And I'm like, no, this is mind-blowing, like groundbreaking stuff. And she's like, oh my gosh, kindergartners know this. And I'm like,
wow.
What? Yeah.
That must be, aren't they like really happy in Scandinavia?
Yeah. Well, my friend has an awesome answer for this, because someone in Japan asked her, she was like, are you guys really happy? And she said, well, they have a lot of services to help people achieve well-being, but you know, there are happy and unhappy people everywhere, but just overall they're doing pretty well.
Maybe the unhappiness is more manageable or something, like, or
Yeah.
more comfortable.
More comfortable. Beautifully said. Yeah.
Thank you. So what is your advice for young people who are wanting to embark on making their own short film and they're thinking of seeking support from different organizations?
I think it comes back to the we're all equals. So just like go at it, get your bills, girl, because, or boy or person, because yeah, who's anyone to deny you that? If you have an idea, who are they to tell you that like that's not worthy of funding or that's not a legitimate project or something? Just apply for grants. Just do it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You waste like 2 or 3 hours, but I'm sure you'd learn something from that application process anyway.
So true. Bit of a controversial question, but do you have a non-creative day job that you also do, or is dance teaching pretty much like your sole job?
Dance teaching and art therapy. I'm trying to think of other ways that I make money. I mean, I work as a just once a week, I work as a disability support worker, but that's a creative job as well, in that I help people achieve their goals, like whether it's so it could be they're seeking a job, I help them to get a job, or if they want to write a resume, I help them to write a resume. So I guess that's not strictly creative, but yeah, everything else I get paid to work with art, which is pretty lucky.
But you consider it creative because it kind of has that feeling that you're like manifesting something into reality.
Yeah. Manifesting, exactly.
Mm-hmm. I love that way of looking at it, like finding the creativity in things that like other people might be like, oh, like boring, you know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Getting to work with people and getting to problem solve, I think that's a joy. That's artistic. I mean, everything's an art, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
There's that quote by is it Bukowski, and he says opening a can of sardines can be art.
Love it. So what were your biggest worries and anxieties going into making Womenarche? And how did you kind of dispel them?
I think just the stigma in general, like I still wasn't fully comfortable with saying the word period around my parents. That was a big anxiety. Also, people who I respected in the arts, them seeing my work maybe and them judging it. And then how did I get over that fear? Probably the idea that not everything is meaningless, but making something and it being average is better than not making something and it being nothing, you know? So I was like, well, I made this film. It took a lot of time. Doesn't really matter if they don't love it.
Yeah, that's so true. I feel like that's one of the biggest problems, like for creatives who are like perfectionists, is that like a lot of people just won't end up making anything. But it's so, I don't know if you relate to this, like as a fellow ENFJ, but I feel like I'm like, I'm a perfectionist when it comes to like myself and like the way I act and stuff like that. But and like I don't know, like I feel like I have a lot of perfectionistic qualities, but when it comes to my work, I'm like so not a perfectionist because I'm more interested in like output.
Yes. Yeah. I did an art exhibition last year on imperfection, basically. And I think it's probably the one outlook for people, the one outlet for people like us is our art, and it being like how ugliness is kind of beautiful, you know? So it's like the things that we make are imperfect, but there's an innocence to that and a beauty to that, because every other part of our life has to be so regimented and ordered.
Yeah.
And I feel like one of the purposes of art is to balance. Like, so if we are really neat in every part of our life, then we'll seek really messy art to balance us out. Thoughts?
Right. That makes so much sense.
That's why people love it. Yeah.
Sorry, say. No, you say.
I was going to say that's why people love minimalism so much, because we've all got these hectic lives living in the city with like noise, and we're like, we just want to look at a concrete wall and feel safe.
That's bleak.
Yeah, but beautiful. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just thinking about like my friends who like struggle with organization, but then like their art is always just like fucking like amazing quality, like just perfect, you know?
It's the balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's why people loved like Rococo interior design, because they were like, well, life is bleak, let's make this really intricately painted ceiling or something.
Right. Bit of a deep question coming up, but
Love it.
and I know that we've talked about like the kind of blurry definition of like qualified. But what do you think the life of Ellie will look like when you're completely unqualified? No, completely qualified and completely unafraid.
Okay. So when you sent me this question, the first dot point that I wrote in my notes was Jessica Stein. I don't know if you've seen Kissing Jessica Stein.
Yeah, me and Abby literally watched it the other day.
Freaking broth, that movie. How she's just like, it's like gay Jewish New York like woman in the 90s. I was like, this is everything. So I'd get up and I'd exercise, and then I'd go to work, and my work would be like, 10 to 4, 9 to 5, whatever, something like that, like set hours. And I would be employed by someone. So I wouldn't have to do all this hectic stuff. And I'd have a secretary who would like book my meetings, so I wouldn't have to book my clients and whatnot. And then after work, I'd go for a surf, or I'd meet my friends for dinner, and then I'd do my laundry, take a bath, and go to bed. That's my dream.
Lovely. So how is that different from your life now?
I have to do a lot of outsourcing myself. Like, I organize my clients. I have to text them reminders, and a lot of them are in like disadvantaged situations. So it's really challenging. Like, I have to send them multiple reminders that they have an appointment coming up, or I have to go and pick them up from their house and bring them to the office. So there's a lot of like output. And I have to like seek funding for my projects instead of them automatically being, given funding. Or there's lots of like, it's like this, and I want it to be like this.
Yeah. That's so fair. So you're craving some stability.
Yeah.
So where can people watch Womenarche, and like how can people best support your creative endeavors?
Well, if you're at a school, I don't know if your audience is school students, but maybe possibly you can watch the film through the Right Journey program. It's like a resource in schools that have that program. Wow. Otherwise, you can always just shoot me. Yeah, pretty lucky. You can just shoot me a message, and I'd be happy to share like a Google Drive file with you. It is in a festival actually in on the 25th of June, the Student World Impact Film Festival. I think you can get a free ticket online to see that.
Cool.
And how can you support me? Just be kind to others and to me. I think that's the best way to support people, right?
Give Ellie a follow on Instagram. What's your handle?
Cheese Mouse, no E after the S. I know my last name is Cheesman, so it's like CHEESMOUSE.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wise words. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Jess. I love you. You know that.